So, if maybe the first thing that you can do is tell us a little bit about yourself, your name, your topic of interest, and how you came to study this.
Good, thank you. My name's Timmy. Timmy as in Temi. Well, last name Oke, three-letter words, very short. I'm originally from Nigeria, but I moved to the United States in late December 2013, and I've lived in DC most of my time before relocating to Buffalo for grad school. Um, so I'm interested in research around LGBTQ asylum seekers, HIV and AIDS, and those are like my two
Mm-hmm.
primary areas of research interest. And I've worked in the HIV field for over 5, 7 years now, and but my research interest in regards to LGBTQ asylum seekers started when I was in undergrad, and so we had to do a research proposal, and I was like, what can I write on? What is not really out there that people have not
Mm-hmm.
talked about or people don't even talk about a lot? And I was like, okay, you know what, maybe asylum seekers, LGBTQ asylum seekers, and more so for the fact that I went through similar process myself, and I was able to understand that one, the subject area is understudied, and
Mm-hmm.
even among social workers, it's not something that everybody knows, like every social workers know, because I remember discussing my topic of interest. And actually, this topic for today's presentation was the same topic I had for my research proposal in undergrad. And I was discussing it with her, and she didn't even know what it means to be an asylum seeker.
Oh no.
And this is a social worker. And well, I mean, she's a faculty,
Mm-hmm.
she has a background in social work, and she was like, "Oh wow, that's an interesting topic." But I could see that she didn't have enough
Mm-hmm.
knowledge to like understand even what that population mean, like what they experience, what things are for them. So I was like, if she who is a faculty who does research doesn't really understand this population, then I think it's an area that should be explored.
Mm-hmm.
And then from my own literature review, when I was writing this research proposal, I discovered that there's not many studies out there. In fact, I had a lot of challenges in terms of finding literatures to use for this research proposal that I wrote in undergrad, and that was I started to develop that deep interest in exploring this area more so to create awareness even in our own profession. And especially for the fact that one of the experiences of this population is, depression, anxiety, and as social workers, those are the things that, we deal with on a daily basis with a vulnerable population. And also because this, group of people are regarded as vulnerable population as well, and they're part of the people that we work with as a profession. So,
Mm-hmm. Awesome. That is super. I'm so interested to hear about this talk because I think you're right. It's very understudied, which means
mm-hmm.
that even as a queer person who's done work with asylum seekers, it's really, I don't have a lot of knowledge in it
Knowledge, yeah.
still.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe you can tell us some just background information,
Mm-hmm.
uh, or really you give us some background information, but leading to the like current status of where your research and your project is right now.
So that's a good question. So in the program currently, I haven't done any like like I haven't gone out to collect any raw data
Mm-hmm.
on my own because I'm still in coursework, and this program is stage by stage, step by step. So I haven't gotten to that stage yet where I would go out and collect my own raw data.
Mm-hmm.
But what I've done in the meantime that I've been doing is to collect literatures, look at
Mm-hmm.
articles, look at what others have done in this area, and then use that as a framework of what I want to do or what I want to research.
Mm-hmm.
And currently, we do know that there are LGBTQ asylum seekers in the country. And these are people who are applying for asylum based on the fact that they're lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, and they're fleeing persecution from their countries of origin. Over 70 countries, mostly in Africa, criminalizes LGBTQ individuals. And as a result of this, some of them have to flee and go to the United States or go to other countries that have provisions for asylum seekers to live permanently in that country. So we do know that, and then we also do know that pre-migration experiences in transit and post-migration experiences also impact the health outcomes of this population. So some of them come with series of exposure to violence and traumatic experiences, and then they come here, they show signs of anxiety, signs of depression that are not being addressed. Because the first thing that is on their mind, their priority is to get their asylum approved and then have the opportunity to live, free of discrimination based on sexual orientation and gender identity in the U.S. So that is there, and even in the profession itself, not many social workers are actually working with this population. So currently, what I've done from my hand is to do a lot of literature review and content analysis. However, I should also mention that something very important that I was involved in. So in 2004, I co-authored a best practices manual. It's a guide that organizations can use to help them understand the issues faced by LGBTQ asylum seekers, and also provides a lot of information on what the population is, what they need, and how providers can help LGBTQ asylum seekers. So I was part of that best practices manual, and it's accessible everywhere. And so that was something that I was involved in, and this was in 2014.
Awesome.
I will be talking about it during the presentation today as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I'll see if we can have a link to that maybe embedded in the video or something. 'Cause people should access that.
Yeah, absolutely. They should, because it has a lot of information, like key definitions, and one of the interesting things we did when we were preparing to draft this manual was we actually heard from LGBTQ asylum seekers themselves. We sent out survey monkeys that people filled in, and they had comment, and so we had a lot of input from the community as well. And it wasn't just a whole bunch of people who didn't have that experience at all that put together this manual. The manual was put together with information from LGBTQ asylum seekers.
Awesome. And so it may say in this guide, or it may expand on it, but what role do you see social workers playing around this issue, around this topic?
A huge role. So the first thing I would say is community education and advocacy, which is something that the few organizations that are working with LGBTQ asylum seekers are trying to address. So we need to educate the community, and we need to increase advocacy for this population. So as social workers, our mandate is we work with vulnerable population. LGBTQ asylum seekers are vulnerable population. So I feel like social workers, we have a huge role to play in helping this population in terms of community education and advocacy, which also means that as professionals ourselves, we first need to educate ourselves about this issue before we can go out there and talk to people about the experiences of this population. So that's also very key. And another thing that I will stress on is, social workers should get involved in especially psychosocial counseling for this population, because I remember then the organization that I went to in DC, they had a pro bono social worker who only comes in when she has the time to come in. That was good, that was appreciated, but she wasn't there when people really need her. She set an appointment with you based on her own schedule when she's available. So if you're in a deep, serious anxiety and depression, and probably you haven't experienced any psychosis, There's no one with that mental health, skill background to talk to that can help you through that process. Um, and I remember talking to the social worker, and from my understanding, there is still a lot that the social worker need to learn in terms of even interviewing this population. And because to be honest, if I can remember correctly, I couldn't see any empathy expressed during my conversation with her, which was weird because even then I wasn't thinking of doing social work, but now that I'm in the profession myself and we talk about empathy a lot as against sympathy, I was like, I'm not even sure if I saw that in this in this person. So that's one thing that social workers can help with, and but I do feel that this is very important for our profession as well, mostly because this is a vulnerable population.
Awesome. And so I think that you've covered almost everything I was going to ask, but it's just like one closing question. Maybe can you think of it, if someone doesn't get to watch your whole talk, if there was like one most important takeaway that you wanted to leave a social worker with, what would it be?
So one big takeaway is don't assume that you know this population. So you need to, because we're like, oh, I went to grad school, I've learned everything about vulnerable population. No, you haven't. There is still a key population out there that it's not even talked about in grad school. Fine, sometimes some classes, some courses, some programs touch a little bit about refugees, and not even all social work students get to attend some of those classes. But refugees are distinct from LGBTQ asylum seekers. So one, don't assume that you know them. Get to know them. If you're really interested in this topic area, there are some informations out there that you could access online. If you Google what it means to be LGBTQ asylum seekers, there are information out there, and this best practices manual that I talked about is also a good resource that you can use to, increase your understanding and your knowledge about this population. So don't assume. And then, because we've already been skilled in terms of adopting a client-centered approach, so that's one huge skill that will be needed if you do decide to be involved in working with this population.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Tony.
Thank you.